Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of One More Cup of Coffee. I'm Tuna, your host for this episode, and I am super excited because joining us today is Genshin streamer and lore enthusiast Arnold, also known by the online alias Murder of Birds. How are you doing today, Arnold?
Uh, would be better if my internet wasn't scuffed, but I'm happy to be here nonetheless.
Well, before we get started with geeking out on lore, could you tell us a little bit about yourself for those here who might not have be familiar with you?
Yeah, sure. As the intro would suggest, my name is Arnold. I go by Murder of Birds online, and I've been a content creator on YouTube since 2013, and I've been a Twitch streamer since around 2017, 2018. I got into Genshin Impact in 2020, actually the day it officially released on PlayStation, and immediately fell in love with the game, the combat, the anime like aesthetic, and eventually the lore is what kept me engrossed in the game ever since. I've been playing it for the last 2 years or so.
Totally relatable because I have also been playing since the first day, so we should have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
So let's get started with what has been going on in this 3.4 update, which has been a lot, a
Yeah.
lot of lore. Um,
Um,
so what so far has been your favorite thing in the 3.4 update?
the interesting thing about this patch was that I felt like the last patch was really light, and it allowed me to kind of catch my breath a little bit with the TCG coming out and the Wanderer, and just kind of taking things relatively easy after the Archon quest of 3.3. 3.4 kind of hit me a little harder than I was expecting, because you had the new extension of the desert area. You had the Lantern Rite Music Festival event that was going on, and whenever this characters exploration, we have the big world quest with the Dirge of Bilquis. I kind of want to. I basically, for this patch, I had to segment off like what I wanted to focus on versus what I wanted to do on stream versus off stream for content. And so, generally, I really love Alhaitham. I think he's a really great Dendro DPS character, for how I use him. Absolutely love Yaya. We've been waiting for her forever. She is a bundle of joy, and I was really happy to see her during the Lantern Rite festival as well. But yeah, generally, I've just been trying to. I mainly focused on the Lantern Rite Festival. I did complete that and finish that up in its entirety because that was limited content, and I've only really explored the desert. I did a little bit of the world quest, which I'm actually going to be streaming that tomorrow and actually like fully committing to that, because it has Jet and Ben from the Golden Slumber quest, which was really great for when that originally came out. So I've just been trying to like take my time and not get too overwhelmed with all the stuff that's out. But based on what I've been hearing and based on what I've experienced so far, this patch has been pretty entertaining throughout.
Yeah, and I mean, each part that was in this release was super packed full of lore, so it's definitely good to kind of take your time going through it just because otherwise it's a lot to try and process. So, you did
Yeah.
mention that you did the Exquisite Night Chimes and finished that, um, which, had a lot of emotions in it, at least for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
with all the Ping and Guizhong and ugh, those cutscenes always get to me. But also how it put an emphasis on music, which I really enjoyed. But what were your favorite parts about the Lantern Rite Festival this year?
Well, the first thing that really like surprised me, and this is kind of like taken out of the game in a sense, was that Dvorak, the new NPC from Fontaine, was actually voice acted by someone within the Genshin community, being Marco Meatball on YouTube, which I discovered that through my playthrough, which I was super blown away by that, because he's pretty well known for his insights to music and opera, and has a lot of insight to the Fatui Harbingers, and derives a lot of meaning for that organization through the music of the game. So I was actually really like I thought that was like just such a cool factor, because it almost felt like someone like me or someone in general who like makes YouTube content is in Genshin Impact, which was really cool. So I think he did a phenomenal performance. I really liked getting a little bit of like, I feel like they're now starting to transition into breadcrumbs of Fontaine. We've gotten Fontaine lore over the course of the game, I think as early as the Wishful Drops event. I believe back in, I think it was like 1.2 or 1.3, I think. And ever since then, like whenever we get Fontaine lore, I'm always looking forward to that, because that's essentially what they're leading into for 4.0, which will most likely be later this year. But for Lantern Rite in particular, I feel like the events have just been getting bigger and better from 1.3's Lantern Rite, and then 2.4's Lantern Rite, and where we are now. Um, the one thing that I think I took away more than anything was just the fact that I was blown away that we got Guizhong lore, because she was a character that I was constantly thinking about, like when we're going to learn about her relationship with Zhongli and Cloud Retainer. And like it turned out to be pretty substantial of how much of a ripple effect her passing had on the Adepti, how it had on Zhongli. Even Cloud Retainer, who went on to perfect her Guizhong ballistas, which then retroactively was kind of like a reference point during the Liyue Archon quests before we knew anything about her. So it was just really cool to just see them reinforce characters that we've known for a few years now, like Madam Ping. We got to see what she officially looked like. Granted, we had a little sense of that during the Moon Chase cutscene, of seeing her design, but not knowing for sure if that was her or if that was Cloud Retainer. Cloud Retainer's design looks great too. She kind of gives me a little bit of like Bayonetta vibes, but it was just really great to feel like I walked away from this event knowing more about them than I did going into it, despite knowing these characters for the last 2 years. The music aspect was really great too, because we there was also kind of like breadcrumbs of the Iridescence tour from Shinyan's perspective. And I feel like Lantern Rite as an event, getting it annually, I think it's great that like obviously MiHoYo is centralized with that, because it's the region that represents their Chinese culture the most, and I feel like that's the event that they would be able to nail time and time again. And I was actually really wondering if they would be able to match the same level of energy as last year's Lantern Rite, because that one was just held in such high regard for me, based on everything that it like amounted up to with the fireworks show and stuff like that. And then this year we get a music event. So now I'm thinking, what are we gonna get next year, and how are they gonna top that? So yeah, it came together beautifully. Getting to see the characters that we don't really get to see as often, because with every additional event being added and every additional region, it kind of spreads thinner and thinner, that you have to worry about the current content, which is Sumeru, but then you also have to remember that other regions exist. And every so often it's you kind of miss the characters that you grew attached to early on in the game. So um yeah, I hope next year we get like Mooncarver and Mountain Shaper like lore, because them two are kind of MIA this year for the most part.
Yeah, they did have the one hilarious line at the end though when they're talking about the bad cooking and how
Yeah.
Shinha had to had to eat plants purely because they didn't know how to cook. So I thought that was a funny add-in. But I couldn't agree more as far as it really added a lot to characters that we either already knew, such as Ping, and ones that we had wanted to know more about, such as Guizhong, and kind of it was really nice to kind of get some more backstory for those
Hmm.
characters,
Yes.
um, as well as getting to see too Venti with his surprise
Yeah. Oh
appearance.
my gosh, the epilogue part. I I would love just that. I would love more of and it's interesting too, because this patch Al Hatham came out, And I actually really loved how they handled his character demo, because typically in the past, for past character reveals, we've gotten like the character in question is the star of the show. There's no other distractions, there's no other cameos or anything like that. And the one thing that I felt like made Al Haytham's demo, which is one of my all-time favorites at this point, was that it just felt like, the boys getting together and just being being friends, playing card games or talking about, you know, like shooting the shit basically. And I loved how it incorporated, other characters that we met throughout Sumeru. And then like I kind of compare that to the epilogue of Lantern Rite, where we had Hu Tao, Zhongli, Venti, and all the other characters of Liwa just around the dinner table just talking. It was so entertaining. Like there was just a lot of banter going on, a lot of like wholesomeness going on. Two archons interacting together, I believe for the first time, was something that I've wanted. I actually really wanted Venti to interact with A back during the Iridori festival, but that was just kind of like there was a different focus at that point in time, with like Kazuha and whatnot. But yeah, I for characters just sitting around and talking, it was so entertaining. I was constantly like giddy and laughing and really excited to just see the characters that I've grown to love, like expressed like that they know each other and that they all like, each other's company. And like I walked away from this, like that was like probably like the best way to cap off the festival. I thought it was going to be the hype of the music and like Hu Tao's rapping and the guitar playing and Madam Ping having her own little segment during that entire festival with the music. But I think the epilogue was a great way to kind of was like a great swan song to it all.
Yeah, it felt like just when you thought things couldn't get any better, then they have the epilogue thrown in and improves it that much more.
Yeah.
So, and what you were saying with the Al Haytham video, I couldn't agree more because that was very funny, but it's also kind of nice to get to see the characters interacting with the other characters that um, we've come to love and enjoy, just because usually for their story quests and stuff, it's NPC focused, which
Yeah.
is understandable. Obviously, the quests are focusing on the characters, so getting some of those, kind of everyday insights and seeing how they interact is just so much fun. And for the Lantern Rite epilogue, some characters who don't usually interact and how funny that could be with the different dispositions and
Hmm.
all the different personalities, and it was just absolutely right where for sitting around and doing talking, it was surprisingly insightful, I felt like.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because that's like something that I feel is very hard to achieve because like it's very static. So one thing that I love too is the camera work that was going on. Like there were so many like camera cuts between like Hu Tao and like there was like one moment between Hu Tao and Shangling, and I was just like, yo, the camera is doing it for me. Like it was so funny just to see the different like angles that they were getting, and it was just so comedic.
Oh, like where they
And
were trying to like pick who would be the
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, and
"I
the
think it should
clapping, oh my
be." "No,
god,
I think it should be."
clapping impact, yeah, the clapping sound effects was just I was dying, it was
Oh, that
so
was
funny.
so great. Yeah, that was so great. Oh, I actually had, like, forgotten about that for a second till, bringing it up, so that
Yeah.
was a fun memory. Um, in addition to that, though, so as far as the music aspect and how that kind of ties in with, memory, venti, like hitting on all those themes, wind, the wind guiding, Dvorak from Mondstadt, which that part was also hilarious. He's like, "Well, I bought all this wine
All this wine.
to."
You got swindled, my guy.
Well, I mean, he got what he wanted at the end. I don't know if it
True, true, true.
technically counts as swindling, but I also thought it was interesting adding to that too, just because with Wine Laserfest, we had the um, memories tied to wine and dandelions. and then
Yes.
kind of carrying that over into now Liyue with Lantern Rite, another festival, by
Hmm.
Venti, who the wind leading the way, and tying that into music, um, and how that also is associated with memory is something I found super interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I actually didn't even think about cross-referencing that with Von Lisa Fest, but yeah, it was actually really cool um how that, like, you can make that observation.
Another thing I'd really liked about the Lantern Rite was where I think it was Cloud Retainer, or maybe actually no, it was Madame Ping, and she was talking about Guizhong's belief in humans and their potential, and so that was also kind of, they could be as strong as us if they reach their full potential, and it's like, oh, isn't that what the whole vision thing is? So that was also kind of a interesting insight, I thought, and how they kind of explored that route and I don't know if really added too much more, but kind of confirmed, the potential of humanity as
Oh
we've been
yeah, I
told by
think I
Arnold.
think that was pretty established. I think that was pretty established during last year's Lanternette, actually, because they had to handle their business with Beisht on their own, and they kind of they coordinated it pretty well. I think Ningguang is a god among men, realistically, because like, she popped off during like that Archon Quest interlude chapter. Shenhe, you know what I mean? Like, she's like, she is like the definition of the human potential. Like, I would almost go as far as to say she is like the strongest human that we've seen thus far, for like what she's been capable of achieving through her relationship with the Adepti, despite being only just being a simple human. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Absolutely. I still
I
remember her walking out like on the water and the ice. I was
yeah,
like, ooh. It was a very cool scene. Very
yeah.
cool. But for me it was kind of interesting seeing it kind of confirmed from like a god's adepti perspective where I feel like it had already been confirmed, but the fact that they've had that view and I mean that would have even been before the whole Archon War and vision
Mm-hmm.
system was in place. So it's
Yeah.
almost like the potential had always been there. Um, which makes it interesting because then it's like, okay, well, then what is the point of the visions and whatnot? But that
Hmm.
is a way bigger rabbit hole than, um, that could go many, many directions. So also too before this, I saw that you were playing the Lisa event quest and
Hmm.
got the outfit, which I still need to do, but um I thought it was interesting too getting to kind of hear from her why she had wanted to leave the academia and her very, very strong insistence that she was not going to go back. It was mostly a battle based one, but it definitely still had some tidbits that I really, really enjoyed lore wise.
Yeah, I remember reading up on her lore just before Inazuma came out. I did kind of like a reading session of all the characters' lore, and that was where I first like caught wind that she was like one of the most brilliant students to ever graduate from the academia. And at the end, like, she graduated in 2 years and was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a librarian. Like, this life just isn't something that I want to pursue. And it's kind of interesting how she was like, she had the foresight to realize how knowledge is both a blessing and a curse, and she kind of really foresaw like where the administration of like Azar and that current that current sage administration was going, with wanting to, as mortals, play god, with having a god of their own. And I contemplated, like, wow, imagine if she didn't leave, like, what her life would have been like, and like what she would have been caught up in. And in a sense, she just basically went to a the Sumeru Academia is just like a grand library, and she just downscaled. And now she just kind of like does things at her own leisure, which is, she didn't change like her profession outright. She still kind of safeguards and manages like knowledge as a resource through being a librarian. Um and it's not as stressful as what was going on with the Akasha system and Lesser Lord Rukkhadevata and things of that nature. So I think that she definitely made the right call considering the outcome following the Archon quest. And yeah, it was just great to just finally learn and get those burning questions answered, because I also wondered like what was it that she was so what would cause her to just like flee that ambition and that pursuit of knowledge that she seemingly had a knack for. And at the end of it all, I feel like she made the right choice.
I agree because drinking tea and reading books all day sounds like a really awesome job. So, I
True.
can't really blame her. But you
Yeah.
also made a really good point that I hadn't really considered, um, which is the fact that the whole trying to, you know, either create a god or ascend into godhood type of thing had actually been going on for a while. It wasn't necessarily um super super recent. Like it had all been leading up to basically what we saw with Scaramouche long before the Fatui had gotten involved. It's just
Hmm.
with the Fatui getting involved, then they had the opportunity to actually expand on that. And I hadn't really thought about that. Like I remember reading in her character lore, I think it was talking about how like the obsession with knowledge and people just literally like not like wearing themselves down because they were so um obsessed trying to like learn or excel. um but I hadn't really thought about the fact that that also tied into the academia and how they were pursuing um the whole godhood aspect long before uh the Fatui actually came. So that's
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
very
That's how
interesting.
yeah. When I heard her say that initially, I just interpreted that as, oh wow, so she realized their potential before they even acted on it. So I thought that was really good. I guess like foresight, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was kind of the she saw the direction it was going and she's like, not about it.
Yeah,
Nope, 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 nope. But also again, can't blame her for, wanting to drink tea and read books, because that does sound really super great. And then she gets to like, make a commission a cute outfit to come visit whenever she wants without having to, you know, have all the downside of things.
yeah.
So I mean, as far as events we've had so far, so we've had the exquisite night chimes, the lantern rite, and the second blooming. Um, but I did you say you did the Al Haytham, or is that on your
Oh
to do
no, no,
list?
no. That's another on my to do list. As of right now, the only thing that I know thus far about the event is that I'll hate them is the acting grand sage until they get their act until they until they get their act together, until they figure out like I guess who's gonna officially take over. So outside of that, I have really no insight into that event just yet. That is something that I'm planning on doing during the second half whenever I finish the desert quest.
Well, then I will look forward to getting to watch it on your stream eventually. So
Thanks,
that'll
appreciate it.
definitely be a fun thing to look into. Now you did mention um a bit ago about how you did the character deep dives. And I actually watched a lot of those videos and they were very, very interesting.
Thank you.
So after having, gone through so many characters and their lore and like really, kind of had the chance to look through all the voice lines, the stories, and um, kind of analyze the character. Like, which characters would you say are your favorite lore wise? Like top three.
Okay. Top three characters for me. For my own personal criteria actually goes a little bit beyond lore as well because not only do I focus on lore, I also do like engage heavily in the meta aspect of the game. Not super heavily, like beyond like getting rewards and focusing on, challenges and events and things of that nature. But my own personal criteria is I have to really enjoy playing a character as much as I love their lore for them to be kind of regarded as like a favorite of mine. So the first character that I would say is my absolute favorite, and this should be no surprise to anyone if you're watching this, is Razor. I fell in love with his character actually during version 1.0, when I was still doing the Mondstadt event. When the game first came out, I'll be completely honest, I didn't really understand how like the elemental reaction system. I understood how it worked on paper, like reading it, and I'm like, oh yeah, you use ice and you use water and you freeze the enemy. But it was a lot harder for me to figure out how to like execute that with four characters and like mixing and melding reactions together. Actually, early on in the game, I almost never used my elemental burst because I thought it was such a valuable like resource. I'm like, I have to save this until I'm in like a life or death situation, and then I use my burst. Even though like back then it's like, well, you get your bursts over time and it's okay, you can use your bursts at like AR5, it's fine. So the reason why I gravitated to Razor was because he was a very selfish playable type of character that doesn't rely on reactions as much as he relies on physical damage. And that was my initial appeal for him. I'm like, oh my gosh, physical damage, and I don't have to worry about reactions. Sign me up for that. And then I did his story quest, and then I got introduced to Andreas, and then his Lupercal Wolfpack like mantra, and that's what really sold me on him as a character. Despite him being somewhat of like a Tarzan-esque character, raised by wolves. Um, and I saw a lot of like potential in him, especially as the game continued on. And whenever I would see him in events like Windbloom, I was head over heels when I saw him during the first Golden Apple Archipelago. And we were just talking about Vine Laser Fest. That is essentially his event. And like learning about his parents and his relationship with Grandmaster Varka was was just like everything. Like it was the best thing I could have asked for him as a character. He's the first character I got to level 90. He's the first character I crowned, the first character I triple crowned. And so for me, that's just like I have such an emotional attachment to him as a character. Even if there's other characters that I think have way better lore than him, I think because he was that first character that I went all in with, I think that's why he'll always be my favorite. I think the only other character that has a shot at over of usurping Razor would be Grandmaster Varka himself if he ever becomes playable down the road. So Razor would be my first option, outside of that long-winded explanation. My second favorite character, and I would say he has without a doubt the best lore in the game for its current implications and its late game story implications, would be Albedo. Um, he's the first character that I like deliberately said to myself, I'm getting that character when he comes out. And I didn't have to wait too long. It was version 1.2. And he's actually the first character I deliberately C6'd as well. He had the Full Metal Alchemist vibe to him, right? With not really knowing what he was. I theorized very early on, actually. It was version 1.2. I said, and I quote, I wonder if Albedo and Durin are related. And that was just based on like a lot of like context clues for the Chalk Prince and the Dragon event. And I really was just kind of like I was threading like needles very loosely and didn't really know if there was any merit to that, despite everything kind of pointing to the fact that he could potentially be a homunculus. And when the Shadow Amid Snowstorms event came out, I felt so validated in the fact that I am so extra when it comes to the lore of the game, that because I deep dive like that, I felt very rewarded for being ahead of the curve before it was officially revealed. Um, I love his gameplay as well. For everything that I haven't really played Albedo in a while actually, but I fell in love with him, especially after Dragon Spine released. And I feel like I was looking forward to Albedo lore again this year because they had a trend of releasing a Dragonspine event every holiday season, and this year they kind of switched it up. So I'm actually looking forward to the next time we get to see him again. So I would say that Albedo is definitely my second favorite for his lore, and his gameplay is really fun. And my third favorite character, and this is a character that it took me until Enkanomiya came out, actually 2.4, for me to really come around to liking and appreciating this character, and it's Kaya. Um, I had this weird mindset, not mindset, I don't know what the word is, but I just had this vibe that I felt like all the free characters that the game initially gave you weren't really as exciting as, like, obviously the banner characters, the 4 stars and 5 stars. And slowly over my time playing the game, that kind of completely unraveled itself. Traveler is a little hit or miss for me. I actually think Dendro Traveler is the best Traveler in the game thus far, and I really hope that they hit the mark with Fontaine like Hydro, Pyro, Cryo Traveler in the future. Amber was another character that I ended up giving a second chance to because of the Misty Dungeon event a while back that lets you play as characters that you might not have if you're like a low spender or free to play player or whatnot. And after that event came out, I was like, oh my god, like I actually I ended up playing Amber again after that. I got her to friendship 10. And I just absolutely loved her kit. I was like, what was I ever thinking to say that this character was like, I don't know what, like, looking back on it now, I wish I had played them sooner because I love them so much now. And the funny thing about that was I had never really used Kaya outside of the first trial run that you get with him during like the tutorial portion of the game. And I remember after Enkanomiya came out, I was like, what characters do I have that I haven't really played? Because I kind of want to dabble in every single character. And I played Kaya for a week. And after that week of playing him, I triple crowned him. And I was like, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? so, so yeah, I ended up triple crowning him, and then obviously over time we learned about his relationship with obviously D-Luke. I through the manga, and learning about his lineage as a descendant of Conrian origins with the Alberich clan, and I feel like Kai is also going to have somewhat of a significant end game role to play, whether it be if we go to the destruction of Conria and he comes along with us, or whether Dainsleif gets involved because he's from Conria as well. And Kai is he's always had that sus vibe to him. Like, I don't think he would ever betray us, but at the same time, I feel like at times it feels like he has his own ulterior motives. So that kind of puts me at odds with how I feel about him from time to time. But that enough is that, like, tantalizing mystery of not knowing what Kai is all about whenever we see him on screen keeps me excited to learn more about where his future is going to be potentially. And I love his gameplay. My Kaya team is like one of my favorites that I run. I run him with Shenhe, Chongyun, and Sing Cho for like a permafreeze team. And yeah, absolutely love him. So yeah, those would be my top three. And I'm sorry for rambling.
No, you're fine. But so the answer to the question though is Mondstadt, right? Those are the top three Mondstadt characters.
Actually, yeah. Just because you gave me a top 10, Raiden Shogun is my favorite Archon. So, and I do have a lot of favorites from Liyue. Shangling was probably my first favorite character in the game because of her story quests during the Mondstadt portion of the game. And I love Kali as well. From the manga, I read the manga before Inazuma came out, and I feel like I manifested. I was like, I really hope Kali is on the banner when we go to Sumeru, and lo and behold, she was on the first banner, and I triple crowned her the day she came out. Just because I loved everything about her from that manga experience, and they kind of did her so much justice in the Archon quest. I'm so happy that they didn't like choose to like kill her off, like especially with like her past coming back with Dottore and learning about her Elazar situation. They didn't really touch on like the Tatarigami that resides within her seal, and that's why I felt like very on edge. The whenever if I as long as Dotori was in Sumeru, I was always like I was constantly on edge that I didn't want Kali to be in the Archon quest at all. I was like, I love you. I don't want to see you after this part because if you show up, then that's red flags for me. So yeah, I would say my initial three are definitely Mondstadt focus, but with the roster getting bigger and bigger, it's harder and harder to limit myself to like a top 5 or a top 10 because these characters just are like I feel like every character that they've come out with has had a little something for everybody.
I absolutely agree because every time I'm like, oh, like I'm probably not going to be interested in this character, and then you know have them for literally one day or do their story quest or read their character stories. And I'm like, oh, I love them. They are such a sweet little bean. But I totally agree with the Kale, though, not being in the Archon quest because that was also concerning to me. I was like, oh my gosh, is something going to happen to her? Or like she's going to
Yeah.
be used, like they're going to do something. But luckily, all turned out well. So, which did kind of make me curious if I know that there were some discrepancies between the manga and the game as far as known lore, whether or not they actually do line up and it's just, false information in the game is also possible. But it kind of made me wonder the fact that they just kind of didn't really mention it at all, if that was going to be something like that changed to some extent.
Yeah, the
Obviously the Fatui involvement and all of that, and kind of balancing out her Eleazar was still the same, but I wasn't sure. Maybe I was like, oh well, maybe like the source of it kind of changed, or like how they
yeah,
sealed it.
cuz I agree because well the seal is still like it's still established because I think one of her ascension voice lines she refers to like, oh, like I'm so strong now I can probably undo that seal and control the power within me, and then she's like, just kidding. And so like those those events of the manga are still established. It's just that they didn't
Ooh, I
hyper
hadn't known
focus
that.
on it at all. And I also was a little confused by the concept of Elazar because I thought Elazar was a result of that sealed, like deceased Archon residue that was within her. But then it turns out that it was like this wider known ailment that plagued a bunch of individuals throughout Sumeru, that was tied to the withering and like the forbidden knowledge and like the forbidden knowledge corruption. So yeah, yeah, and I also felt like again like those death flags were starting to perk up really early on because a typical trope in anime is like if you're getting a character's backstory or if you're getting like full blown like lore on a character, it's because that character's gonna die soon. So they're trying to like get you hyper invested in this character and learn everything about them because when they die, that's all you got of them. So like the Archon quest initially, like the startup for Sumeru was basically they were just kind of like they were basically giving us everything of Kali's lore, and that's why I was like super worried about where they were potentially going with that quest because I know that it's partially due to the people not who may have not read the manga. Like you don't want to have people like, oh, if you want to learn about her, go read the manga. You want to have that in the game, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like an anime trope was being played. But yeah, I'm just really happy that she's okay.
And Hoyo is known to kill off characters that are beloved by the fan base, so it would not be the first time that they
Hmm.
did like something like that in a game. So, um, it is always a concern anytime, like the Xiao scene, like in the chasm event. I
Oh
was like,
yeah, the
"Oh
fake
my
out there.
gosh, no!" But
Yeah, thank God for
luckily, it all was
Zhongli.
good. But I had a very serious moment of panic where I was like, "They're gonna kill him!" So thankfully they didn't. Thankfully they didn't. But it's always kind of has me on edge, like you said, where they're kind of really deep diving into the lore of a character, and again, like with the Xiao part where it was like he was kind of resolving the final wish of his friend and putting them all to rest and whatnot so he could resolve all his lingering guilt um in that aspect. So I was like, oh my gosh, they are like they're setting this up for something bad to happen. But
Yeah.
luckily it was all good.
I have a feeling that that like all of this is like, all right, like for Zhao, for example, like that moment of sacrifice was a moment of acceptance for him, and then Zhongli saved him, so that's kind of like a fake out moment for the audience. And then again, similar to how I felt with Kali, it was like death flags, you have that vibe and then nothing. I really feel like this constant back and forth of like, will they do it, will they do it, or won't they do it? I feel like they're constantly like going back and forth with us now, but then when we get to like Celestia and Conria, I feel like that's where like all bets are off, and they're like, all right, we've been like prepping you for this moment, and like we're gonna have like a Calamity 2.0, and that's where things are really gonna just be like, you never know who's gonna go. And like I don't know, I feel like that's an avenue that they could definitely go down, where it's like everyone is kind of safeguarded and like has plot armor for the sake of making it to that end game point. But then when you get into what seemingly is like the true end game, which is the Abyss, Celestia, Conria, and whatever comes beyond that, like whatever else is beyond the world of Teyvat, that's where like death flags and like all of like the like high intense anxiety is going to be felt for these characters. Um, and it's only compounded on the fact that we will have had years to develop like bonds and like emotional attachments and like be super invested in them by that point.
Yeah, and it seems too, especially with Fontaine coming up and Lee Ben's comment about, the judgment is coming. It's like, looks like, things are gonna kind of slowly start getting more serious. Um, Not that they haven't been serious thus far, but as we're kind of getting closer to the end of the journey, the potential for, the stakes keep getting higher and things kind of seem to be getting more and more dangerous. So as we're going down that route, we're kind of getting closer and closer to maybe having an event or a catastrophic something to uh, that could result in a character death. Though I am totally crossing my fingers that they don't do that because I love all of the characters and I don't want any of them to go. They are all special to me. Well, speaking of, actually, I guess I won't get into that because we are about to go to an intermission. So is there anything you want to say in regards to favorite characters before we take a small little break?
um no, not really. I feel like I feel like I went on my little spiel a bit too long there, but yeah, I mean, the characters that I really enjoy, I I feel like 2 out of 3 of them, like I feel like I'm getting everything that I got out of Razor, especially with the Vine Lacefest and his parents and stuff like that. I feel like his lore for the most part is pretty much like solidified. It just sucks that I feel like I'm gonna have to wait years before I learn more about like Rhine Daughter and Albedo and Subject 2. Um and for Kaya, Lord knows when that's gonna happen. Dainsleif would have to come back, I feel like, for there to be anything significant going on with Kaya. Either that or we get to endgame with Conria. But yeah, I mean, those are my 3 favorites for sure.
Well, how about we continue this? We'll take a short intermission and be gone for 5 minutes and see you all on the other side of that.
See you soon. I can hear you.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to One More Cup of Coffee. Sorry, I was having a little technical issue. Um, but I wanted to move on and talk about Fontaine. You had mentioned earlier about how they've kind of been dropping little lore bits here and there, especially with this release, with the Lantern Rite and Ayako's new outfit. But even more so, I felt like with Lieben back when he made the little side comment about, you know, the judgment, the dark clouds were gathering and people feeling like judgment was upon them. So I'm kind of curious based on, what we know about Fontaine so far and how it's kind of been presented, what you think we kind of might see going forward.
Yeah, sure. So I would actually say that among the four nations, well, I guess Fontaine would be the fifth, but among the five nations that have been somewhat established thus far, I feel like I know so much about Fontaine already before it's even released. The Wishful Drops event that happened during the first year of Genshin focused on the Lock Folk Endora, the little Lock Folk pet that you get as a reward at the end of the event. Really kind of gave us the lore of the Oceanid, which are these creatures that seemingly are like the governing natural force of Fontaine, similar to the Four Winds of Mondstadt, the Adepti of Liyue, the Yokai of Inazuma, the Aranara of Sumeru. It seems like the Oceanid, or rather the Oceanid, are that similar force of nature for the region of Fontaine, and the Oceanid that we know as Rodea, that's in Chinksa Village, hails from that nation, and that was like the first major instance of giving us a bit of lore regarding the Hydro Archon, or the previous Hydro Archon, and the kind of shift in power following the previous Archon's death and the new current Archon taking over, and how the Lockfolk felt about that, and how they decided to kind of I guess secede from that nation entirely. Um Learning more about it as time goes on has been really exciting, because again, Libin, whenever he comes around, he kind of gives us a little bit of insight to a different nation or his thought process on it. Like you mentioned, he mentions that like there's a lot of shady business going on in Fontaine, that he tries his best to kind of like stay away from that place, because it's just like an impeding doom. It's like an impending doom is coming for Fontaine in particular. One of the events that I remember very fondly, didn't really focus on lore all too much, but the Vibro Crystal event that happened during the release of the Chasm was one that like got me so excited, because the I forgot the NPC's name, but there's an NPC that was spearheading that combat event, which was a really fun combat event. It was like an endless waves of enemies with a bunch of like reactions and effects that was super fun. And he mentioned that, and I think this was the first time we heard of it at the time, that Fontaine is struggling through an energy crisis, and that stipulations for individuals who leave Fontaine are like tasked with finding a resolution to that energy crisis. And if they spend if they spend Fontaine resources and then go back home empty-handed, they can actually be tried and like sent to prison, or have like some punishment brought upon them by the Hydro Archon and like the court system. So that also kind of told me that like it seems like there's gonna be like I don't know why, but like in my head I feel like there's like Fontaine is gonna be a very like industrial revolution steampunk vibe, with just trying to survive in this like this commercial world, and like a lot of their free thinkers, I should say, are all kind of like vying for that same level of approval of the Archon. We also had the I forgot what it was called, but it was basically like that little Gears mini game event where you had to like combine the gears and have them all connect and turn to each other. That one gave us a lot of lore regarding the Daydreamers, which is a kind of like a gentleman's club, if you will, of free thinkers and inventors of Fontaine that are all kind of excel in different ways. Xavier, one of the NPCs that we met in Inazuma initially, he wants to be the world's best filmmaker. Garcia is creating a numbering machine, which I guess is either like a calculator or a supercomputer or something to that extent. There's another individual that's trying to make literally a rocket ship that can put people in it and send them into the heavens, which I don't even like. I thought in my head at that time, I'm like, that's literally how we're getting to Celestia. We're going to get on a Fontaine rocket ship and it's going to shoot us into the stratosphere and we're going to break through the firmament and end up in Celestia by the end of the game through Fontaine's effect, which is probably why, the Hydro Archon doesn't want to, make an enemy of the divine. She doesn't want their technology and creations to get too crazy. And there's another individual who wants to make a perpetual energy machine, which would, number one, solve Fontaine's energy crisis, but additionally, Conria had actually already created a perpetual energy machine 500 years ago, and we all know what happened to them. So we don't know why Celestia took down Conria. I don't know if it's because they became too advanced, too big for their britches. But it seems like Fontaine is very much on the same level of ingenuity and technological, like striving for technological advancements to the same degree as Conria was. Um, and like you put all these things together, and it kind of makes for an interesting region because it seems like they're maybe the most intellectual in how do I word this? I feel like they're the most intellectually um I feel like they like whereas Sumeru had all of this knowledge and they kind of misused it, I feel like Fontaine has all of this technological insight and actually applies it to like helping out their nation, and um that potential could take them to like the next level, which would then put them on Celestia's hit list or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, like Fontaine is just super super exciting to me. I wonder what it's going to look like. I know it's a nation of water. um I just wonder like I'm just really excited to just learn more about, and obviously we got Focalors, the name of the Archon, and just like learning a little bit more about what we can potentially get of them once we actually get there. So really, really looking forward to what that place is gonna offer us in the future, and the characters too, like Line and Lynette from the preview chapter trailer. It seemed like they could be a 2-in-1 character, which seems pretty neat. But yeah, I love the vibe that Fontaine gives off, and yeah, I'm just really excited to get it later this year.
Yeah, one thing though, as far as I remember in one of the events, the Inazuma one, the toy maker, I think his
Oh yeah,
name's
yeah, the
Hector.
little toys you make, yeah.
Yeah, because he had made a comment. So there's the convenience of all the technological advancements that they have, but he had made the comment about, it's super convenient place to live for some people, and for other people, it is literally terrible. It sounds like,
Yeah.
and it sounded like he was on that end of the spectrum, um, which it kind of makes me wonder if, people. I mean, all the events that I could think of right now, I guess, besides maybe some of like the filming ones, are all like based on energy, and trying to find new energy solutions, trying to find um, something to. I think it was I'm trying to remember what it might have also been, that Inazuma toy one where he was talking, or it might have been the Vibro Crystal one. I can't remember now, but one of those two events, they were just talking about, um, again, the energy crisis and how there's this kind of worry about how sustainable the current energy supply
Yeah.
is, and what that could mean, especially because we've seen, what elemental energy excess does and how that can go negatively with, all the ley line stuff, with the dark mud, with many, many things. So it's kind of I think it'll be interesting the setting, but also too like what the potential of that could be for how things go down and what could possibly go wrong.
Yeah. I'm also curious as to like what Archon, not Archon, what Fatui Harbinger is going to be overseeing that region, because it seems like we're going to get one of them per region as well. If I had to guess, I would like it to be Sandrone, because there's like theories that she like is the creator of like the like she creates, like she has like that ruin guard, or that ruin butler, if you will, that like kind of holds her in place. And like with Catherine being a puppet, which is like the host of the Adventurers Guild, which is headquartered out in Snezhnaya by the Fatui. I wonder if she'll make an appearance sooner rather than later, and if not her, then I wonder who else would take up that role for the Hydronosis when the Archon quest happens.
I'd be happy to see any of the harbingers because there's always like a lot of interesting stuff that we end up learning whenever they appear, and so far they've all been. I know we got a little bit of Capitano lore from the Vineland
Fine
Fest, but
Lacerfest, yeah. Oh my god,
yeah,
that's
but
my
he's in Natland, so we know it's not him.
yeah.
uh,
If you
I know
don't
we
mind me
got a
asking,
little bit of
what were
Capitano lore
your? I know
from
this is
the
kind of off topic,
Vineland
but
Fest,
I don't
but
really,
Oh my
I
god,
don't
yeah.
usually have opportunities like this to chit chat with someone about lore extensively. But what was your thoughts on the Winter Nights Lazo trailer when that first came out? Because I know that
Uh,
really shook up the community, because no one expected it. It was just kind of like a big treat for everybody, and I felt like everyone was talking about it at the time.
Oh my gosh, yes. It was it came out of nowhere and then we got to see who everyone was, which was a huge surprise just because before that point like we didn't have any information on except for like, side comments on what they look like or really what their roles were. And so after that release and kind of getting to see the group and how they were interacting, that
Yeah.
was such a big treat just because you know, aside from the fact that Signora was dead, the rest of the the
Yeah.
gang was there, and also too just kind of the um Piero like doing the moving the chess pieces around and having the gnosis like on the chessboard where it's just like okay, well that was totally not expected, but it was definitely a huge treat to get to actually see the whole group and kind of you know be able to expand on that instead of them just being oh well we know they exist and some of their titles, but um
Yeah.
then it kind of allowed like narrowing down some ideas and also kind of made something like didn't narrow down some stuff like with Capitano where it's like why are you wearing that mask again like
Oh, he
it,
is
it looks awesome
he's
so
my favorite of them. And when I found out that he's going to Natlin, I was like, I can't believe I'm not going to see this man for 2 more years. Because
yeah, I was
he
really
is,
sad with that. I was like
yeah.
no. Yeah, because we've gotten a lot of interesting information on well I shouldn't say a lot, but the info we've gotten on him has been interesting thus far where you know kind of seems like a chill dude, like hanging out with the Mondstadt
Yeah, the Knights of
expedition.
Favonius. Yeah.
Yeah, like Varka's like, writing a fan letter basically. But
Yeah.
but yeah, he's definitely really cool. I mean, all of them I think so far. I mean, we have more info on some than others, but uh very, very excited. But yeah, Capitano's definitely like the whole mask thing. It's kind of like, ooh, that just, makes everything so much more suspicious.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like some of the other ones,
Yeah, I
What
have a couple of theories on him, to the point where I call him Copitano, because I'm like, some of my theories are like, I'm like really coping hard with like wanting some of them to be true. But yeah, without a
well,
doubt, he is my
what are some of those theories?
uh I think he might be okay. So when the trailer first came out, I just threw out like a random theory that I wonder if he could be Eamon from the Eamon clan after the fall of Solvin Dagnir, and he ends up joining, because like we never found out what happened to him, and he kind of like disappeared after the fall of that civilization. And now that we know that people like Dottore and La Signora and Scaramouche are hundreds of years old, I'm expecting any of these Fatui harbingers to live like beyond the normal like life expectancy of an average human being. So like, even if Solvin Dagnir fell like 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, or however long it would have been, I think that would just be a really interesting prospect, because Dragonspine is within the Mondstadt territory, and then you have him interacting with the Grandmaster of the Knights of Favonius during an expedition to Snezhnaya. And I felt like that like lended a little bit of credence to the theory, just because it's like these things were lining up, and it seemed like relatively I don't know, it seemed like good enough for me to just be like, you know what, I'll take it. That if you squint hard enough, you can make it work. And I'm like, cool, great, I want that to be the case. And then I read the Bloodstained Chivalry um artifact set, and the Bloodstained Knight, the lore of that, and we he has a similar mask to the mask of that Bloodstained set. And for that artifact set, it kind of reveals that the Bloodstained Knight was once like a white knight of like chivalrous order, and he like fought for justice, and he went and fought like a bunch of abyssal monsters, including like abyss mages and hilly churls. And then eventually he realized that these creatures were once humans, and realized that that was the biggest injustice of all, was that like the abyss kind of warped his perception of what was an enemy and what was friend and what was foe, and thus decided to enact revenge against that injustice. Which I guess you could also kind of like, it's either I would just really want him to either be Emunlauker, Bloodstained Knight, or both of them. And it's just like an evolution of his life over time. Those are the two Copitano theories that I'm going with right now.
Well, I'm totally on the Eamon Locker Copitano train, or I was kind of like Knight of Boreas or Eamon Locker, like either of those would be kind of cool. Um, but with the whole Bloodstained Knight thing, that would also be interesting, just because the first we learn about that is way back at the start of the game in Mondstadt artifact farm, or is that Liyue? Either way, early game artifact farming, and then now seeing kind of how um, the Bloodstained Knight with his younger brother ended up traveling to Sumeru, and he's kind of been on a journey across to that. So I could definitely see kind of with the direction we're going, if he was the Bloodstained Knight, like the fruition of that story and whatever it was he found, which is most likely that the injustice of the whole Conria and the curse and whatnot. um if they kind of like finished that journey um when we actually get to see him in Natlan, though it'd be cool to get some more lore before that, definitely. But I could see it going either way, though. I personally like the Eamon Locker side of things, just because we have so little information on like that stuff hasn't been
Yeah.
expanded on since Dragonspine um, the was released, basically. So would really I really hope they expand the lore for some of those old Mondstadt more specifically Eamon Locker, but
Yeah,
side of things.
I agree. I wanted to ask you another question, if you don't mind. What do you so this is a two-part question. Number one, what do you think the Genshin Impact anime will be like, and what would you want it to be? Like, what would you want it to present for the world of Teyvat for Genshin Impact?
Well, one thing that I hope they kind of do, but I don't know how they do it is I kind of really liked that they had the twins together, you
Hmm.
know, like
Yeah,
and it's like it'd be really nice to get some lore of them actually getting to interact in a in in an earlier manner. I don't see how that'd be possible based on what we currently know of the lore, but
yeah,
um it kind of got me excited. I was like, "Oh, well, it's showing them together. Maybe maybe there's a chance." Um, but also too kind of expanding on some of the backstories that, maybe aren't necessarily as end game important, but like are still interesting for developing the characters themselves. Like I just love every time we kind of get to learn more about like the characters' lore and we're getting to see them interact. So even
yeah,
if it just had that kind of stuff, I would absolutely love it. But what
yeah.
are your thoughts on it?
For me, I think I mean this wholeheartedly. I think the Genshin and like I think this Genshin anime project has so much potential, like to be like a long-lasting thing that enriches the Genshin experience, whether you're playing the game or not playing the game. I actually think the anime will be something that a lot of people who don't even play Genshin will get involved in, just because anime is such like a big part of like online zeitgeist and just pop culture in general, for people to just have something to share and talk about. But I think it would be incredible if the Genshin anime focused on past events prior to the events of the game, because then it would act as a great like primer to get people into the game. Because I think it would be a little bit of a wasted opportunity for them to basically make an animated version of what you're already playing and experiencing. um a lot of the things that have already come and gone, like everything that happened prior to the traveler's journey starting on the beaches of Mondstadt, is kind of left up to interpretation and like research, and like finding out those nitty-gritty details yourself through reading weapons and artifact lore and things of that nature. I think it would be cool to kind of see for yourself the different forms of calamity that took part at each individual nation 500 years ago, and kind of better paint the picture of the battle at the battle at the chasm, for example, or the battle between the Raiden Shogun and Orobashi and the Watatsumi, like the Watatsumi resistance, or how the Marana basically overtook the rainforest, and how that affected Ruka Devada and King Deshret and things of that nature. I think the anime has a lot of potential for flushing out the past, to also be like a nice gateway for people who watch Genshin for the first time and want to play the game themselves, and it won't spoil anything for them necessarily, like with the Archon quests that are currently going on, or the current timeline story. And I just think it would flow better if the anime focused on the past and then the game focused on the present and potential future. And that's just kind of like how I would go about it. And similarly to you, that first like trailer promotional video that they showed with Aether and Lumine at the beginning, I felt like that was just to establish, hey, these characters, they're from Genshin. We needed to put them in here so you knew what the game was about, because other than Paimon. But realistically speaking, yeah, I don't know. But at the same time, I'm like, how can you? At the same time of everything that I just said, it would be kind of hard to do any of that stuff and even have it be noticeable as Genshin without one of the siblings and Paimon. You know what I mean? Unless it's just like a Paimon like story time where she kind of takes you through a point in Teyvat's past and a portion of the lore that's interesting or special or whatever. But at the same time, you're gonna have a lot of Genshin players that are gonna be watching this, and they're gonna want to see the stuff that they've been invested in, the characters that they know, over lore and stuff that they might not know. That'll be appreciated, but it's not what they know of their time playing Genshin for the last 2 years. So there's a lot of potential. I just hope that it's more than just a simple anime adaptation of the video game, just because I feel like there's just so much more that you can do beyond just that.
Yeah, I agree. I also hope it's not that because I already spend a lot of time looking at Genshin lore, so I really just don't need it wouldn't be as exciting to,
Yeah,
I'd probably still love it, but it would not be as exciting to have the same story again. But I
exactly.
guess it'll also probably um, depending on when they're actually planning on releasing it because I absolutely love the idea of, covering stuff like past events, like going into like the Archon War and like actually getting,
Yes, exactly.
some anime episodes of that. Like, that would be so awesome. Or the whole like, Goddess of Flowers, Deshret, Ruka Nevada arc. Like, love to see all that. But I also feel like too, like there's so much that's secretive about the timeline and whatnot where we get little bits and pieces but unless the story kind of gets they wouldn't be able to reveal a lot depending on when the anime actually comes out because they wouldn't want to
Yeah, they
you
wouldn't want
know
to
s-
spoil it for the core game.
yeah, so it's kind of a I mean, I guess if they've pretty much covered a story, like, um, kind of what we just saw with Lantern Right, where we kind of got the gist of what happened within the Guili area and with Guizhong. So it's like maybe they could have, an anime episode or two that focused more on that group because we already are aware of how things turned out and um, somewhat of an order of events. And then it would just expand more on the interactions and maybe add some extra stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Like one thing that I remember actually, now that we're talking about it, is they released this Mondstadt animation short that was just like, it was such a cool, like they basically just kind of animated like key locations throughout Mondstadt. They had the music, they had NPCs featured throughout it, and I was just like, "Oh my god, like you really have to have that Mondstadt." Like, as much as I would want them to focus on the aristocratic era and the liberation of Mondstadt with Lady Vanessa, or the Decarabian with the Nameless Bard and the little wind spirit Venti Barbados, um it's like a push and pull kind of thing, because like you mentioned before, like I feel like I'm like a sponge, and anything Genshin related I absorb and I retain. And like, for them to kind of regurgitate something that I already know isn't going to be as exciting for me, because it's like, well, yeah, I already know that. I want to be just as excited and just as invested in this new project, as someone who doesn't know any of the stuff that I know. I want to be able to be excited to learn about things and look forward to certain things. It's really tough, because like there's only really two ways they can go about it. You either focus on the past or you focus on the present, but
well,
you'd have
can
to
I
make
can I
it.
propose a third way?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
How would you feel about if they basically did kind of a I'm not going to call it a samsara is not the word I'm looking for, but basically a different and this is just kind of my copium of wanting the twins to be together because I love them both, but of them journeying through to that and how being together and traveling would change or something along those lines where it's actually not the same as like it's the same world and we get to
Mm,
see the same characters, but maybe get to see a different kind of storyline type of thing. I think I'd start
I
getting confused about lore, but
I'd
but
like that. Actually, that is kind of an interesting perspective, because it's either one or the other. You either have your journey with Aether or you have your journey with Lumine, but to have a journey with both of them, and it's not like you're going through like realistically it would just be the dynamic would be different, but all the beats would be relatively the same. Um yeah, I think that would be interesting just because it would have both of them. But it's just so like the major story beats would be off to an extent only because like it's heavily based on one of you being taken away and like series of events happening that lead to this journey. You know what I mean? Because then it's like a butterfly effect because then it's like, well, if the twins never got taken away, then who's leading the Abyss Order and who's
Who
managing.
poisons Dvalin?
Yeah, like who does, you know what I mean? Like it's like, well then at that point you have like an Irminsul tampering situation where it's like, well, those things still happen. It just wasn't you who did them. You know, like with Wanderer. Um so yeah, I don't know. I would really want it to be canonical. Like I wouldn't want it to be like this big budget funded project with Ufotable as animation head and Hoyoverse, producing it, and then it's just like these are a bunch of scenarios and situations that have no impact on the greater Genshin plot. It would be nice to experience, but at the same time, I would want my investment to go deeper than just playing the game. If you have this whole other project that seems like it's going to be really hype and exciting. Another thing that would be interesting too is if, depending on like how they run it season wise, I don't know if they'll do like one season focus on Mondstadt, another season on Liyue, and so on and so forth. I feel like too much of one thing would be too much for some people, but I don't know. We're just spitballing here. So for the most part, I have faith that it'll be great. It's just a little frustrating because I can't. We won't know until we know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's definitely something it's like, I'm really excited about it, but it's like, "Oh, like, I wonder what direction this is gonna take and, when is it actually going to be coming out?"
Oh
Because
my
there
god,
are
yeah.
so
That
many
when it comes.
times where, "Hey, this is in the future," and then it's like, "Okay," and then I waited, like, I don't know, a decade for Kingdom Hearts 3 or something. Like, it's just, you know
Oh yeah.
maybe not quite that long, but, sometimes I don't think that's what's gonna happen with the anime, to clarify. But but yeah, it's kind of okay, well, are they gonna wait till, we've kind of basically got to the point where showing past stuff wouldn't be spoilery? Because that would be, kind of the balancing act between giving us information on the past without, you know, something in the past events kind of spoiling the future of what we're going to learn onto that and stuff. So
Yeah.
I
At the
think
end of the
that'll
day,
play a
that
big part of the potential.
yeah, that comes down to pacing too. Like typically with anime and manga adaptations, like usually they'd want to be like so far ahead in the manga that when they start adapting the anime, they don't even have to worry about ever catching up. And with Genshin being on like a 6 week cycle and the anime, I can't see that thing coming out for at least another 2 years at least. Um, Hell, we might actually be at Snezhnaya by the time it comes out, and that would be nice too because then, on one end, the Genshin journey is reaching its quote unquote end with the Seven Nations, but then it's re-upping again with this game. I'm sorry, with this anime production that Lord knows how long, and that's a long term project that they have as well. So yeah, I don't. There's a bunch of different ways they can go for it, but as long as it's the same world and characters that we know and love, locations, music, etc. Um, I'm like super excited to just cover it as someone who focuses on Genshin lore. Um, because it's like we get to experience the world, we get to experience Genshin again for the first time. So it's like it's kind of like we're getting that first experience again, which is always exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just like you had said before, I wouldn't want the exact same thing, but I definitely want, you know, the same world and the same characters and like I wouldn't want a bunch of new characters that, I'm either not playing with or that aren't in the game kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of potential, so I'm super excited and it looked really cool, but it's it was also just so it was just such a small bit they gave us. It's like, "Oh, I want more." Like, how could you just do that
I
to
know it
me?
feels
Just
like
give me
a
this little bit.
it feels like forever ago that they announced that too, actually. Like it just I'm like, is it coming out anytime soon? And it feels longer than it actually was.
Yeah, which is it kinda makes me wonder, like, why they would announce it so early. I mean, maybe just to build hype kinda thing. I mean, because it definitely hyped me up. I was very excited. But,
Yeah, that was
but
it was
yeah,
great for the anniversary as well. So maybe they'll have
yeah,
more info next year.
hopefully sooner than that. They can't keep us waiting that long, can they?
Well, yeah, the third anniversary is this September, so hopefully by the third anniversary like patch, they'll hopefully have more info. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be great. Also, too, I saw in the comments, and it kind of makes me wonder. Someone had mentioned about maybe it covering past in-game events. I could also see that being super interesting, just because those are, I mean, they'd still be a repeat in story, but it would be kind of nice to revisit that. Though I do believe I saw somewhere they're trying to figure out a way to like, or they're working on a way to um, have the redoable events to some extent. Because I do
Uh
think that's one thing that kind of, for people who haven't played since the first day,
oh man,
um,
I can go on a tangent right now about that. That's like one thing that like drives me up a wall. Like I do an event and the first words out of my mouth is I can't believe this is limited con. I said that about the Guizhong lore that we just got. Like there's tangible
massive.
lore, there's
It
tangible
was massive.
permanent content in the game that mentions her, but then you could literally play the entire game after this patch and never learn about her because and I think it was from the I don't know how credible it was looking back on it now, but I believe it was the GameSpot interview that asked the question because they mentioned that at the time that it was published they were the Golden Apple Archipelago for 2.8 had just released, and Fischl and Mona were already well acquainted, but people never saw their first interactions during 1.1 and for the Unreconciled Stars event. And the question that was proposed was, is there going to be a way for for newer players to experience old content? I don't know if they'd do that in an actual playable sense, like you can play the event. They might just, and I'm surprised they don't do it on their YouTube channel where they just have all of the cutscenes of those events, like all of the dialogue and cutscene related stuff, and just cut out all the gameplay, just to kind of give some semblance of uh like salvaging something for people who want to follow that lore. Um, but they did say that they're looking into it, and so I really hope that they do follow that through because there's a lot of content. Like I also have to go back to YouTube if I want to watch certain cutscenes of certain things that I was there for. It's like it's cool. It's converted to memory. Yeah, I have it streamed. I have my own stuff, like my own like live streams preserved of that stuff too. But I sometimes I just want to go and like watch the Lantern Right 2.4 ending cutscene again because it was just so magical, or seeing Sus Beto, subject to attack the Traveler and Eula, like that cutscene is just super hype and like just really cool to just go back and be like, wow, I was here for that, but this is still cool. Like it aged so well, like watching it back even now. So I that's one thing too. Like I feel like every year more and more people are getting into Genshin for the first time. I remember when 2.0 came out, it was pretty much like the game re-released. And I feel like it's gonna be like that for every patch or every like regional patch at the very least. Um, and like for the more people get in, the more stuff that they're missing out on for not starting sooner. And I don't think anyone should be punished for that. So I hope that that is something that they do moving forward. I don't know if they do it in animation form or if they re-release the patch or re-release the events in a future patch, but you don't get the rewards for them or whatever the case might be. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's just I feel like getting to play through it again would be great. I mean, luckily the there is access. You could go and watch the events that people have put up and whatnot. But it's just getting to actually play Unreconciled Stars, which at the time, I didn't appreciate the this like what was being said as much as I do now, where it's like, oh my gosh, like I was not paying attention the way that. So luckily can like go back and at least see online, but getting to play through it is definitely a completely different experience. And also too, it's like for the Wishful Drops event, um like are people even able to get Endora anymore?
Oh
I'm
no,
not.
that
Yeah.
like most events, like, and that's another thing too. It's like the Sealy, the Lost Riches event comes back annually. It seems like every time a new region comes out, you're able to pick one of the Sealy. But for like Shiki Taisho and Endora, those seem to be one and done, like one time only, limited uh rewards for those who were there at the time to do that content. Which again sucks because, like, even rewards aside, like there are some people that I know that were like, man, I never got to finish the uh Chalk Prince and the Dragon event. So I got the Festering Desire weapon, but I only got 2 refinements for it. So it's stuck at R2 forever instead of R5. It's just weird because, like, they, I don't know if you know this, but like they have, over time they release the like the, I guess I would call them like recreational gadgets in the toy shops in Liyue Harbor. So like if you go to Liyue Harbor and you talk to like the Granny Shan toy seller in like in that, for in like that opening square area near the waypoint in Liyue, or if you talk to, I believe, to Marjorie in Mondstadt, you can get like the gadgets from Windbloom or last year's Lantern, right? Like you just have to pay like a shit ton of more. And you can get the firework tube, like the launch tube, for example. They just added that. And in Mondstadt, you can get the Windbloom. You can get like the Windbloom commemorative balloons and like the commemorative gadgets for those. And I guess at the end of the day, those are just kind of like, they're just like whatever items if you want to just like mess around with your friends and pop balloons in their world or whatever. And it's just weird that they don't do that for like the actual event items that would be super meaningful to people, even if it's like a million more, like something that someone can work towards despite them, just because they weren't there at the time.
Or
Um,
didn't have enough time at the time to. I hadn't
yeah,
even
yeah,
really thought
that,
about because
yeah, that
I've
too.
I've gotten to complete all the events
Yeah,
in their entirety, so I hadn't even really thought about the fact where you can't finish refining a weapon because it's like, oh, well, never gonna see this again because,
yeah.
Festering Desire was locked behind and you didn't complete it. So I know like Endoran's stuff is, more cosmetic and whatnot, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
also
cosmetic
like
is.
collecting things, so
Yeah.
I would be
Like, and
sad if I didn't have her.
I sympathize with that a lot too, because when Genshin first came out, I had a horrible like work-life balance with, because I was focusing on like another series that I covered on my other YouTube channel. So I was focusing on that, and then there was also Genshin, and I didn't realize how much of a initial how I didn't realize initially how much of a like time sink Genshin was for me once I started investing in the lore. So like for example, the Unreconciled Stars event, I had to finish that on the last day, and I managed to do it. I didn't stream it, but I recorded my reactions to it. But even then, that was just like I had to like circumvent what I would normally do. Like I would have streamed it with my community live, but I just had so much going on in my life that I had to like circumvent that because I didn't want to miss out on, that was my first event. Like technically it was the first story event in the game too. People say Elemental Crucible was terrible, and that was just that was like a glorified ley line. And back then you had to pay resin to do those events too, which was, I'm so
I
glad that that
remember
was like a
that.
one and
That was
done.
horrible.
Yeah. So and then actually Lantern Rite Festival, people in chat will tell you I did all of, I'm sorry, not Lantern Rite, Windbloom Festival. I did an 11-hour stream I did the entire event from start to finish on the last day, and it took me 11 hours to do, and I've never done that ever again since then, because that was like, I would never like like it. Looking back on now, that was a horrible decision on my part to like willingly do that, and I'm actually happy that I did it regardless because it was great all around. But and we haven't gotten a Windbloom since then. But yeah, it's just like I understand like that some people actually have like a way harder, a way tougher, a way more strict, crazy lifestyle than me, or just as much as I do, to where they just can't get to everything. And it's either, you know, you have to, it's like, oh yeah, I won't do this event. I can watch the cutscenes on YouTube, but there are these limited event weapons and gadgets that I won't be able to get because, you know, I can't play out when the game wants me to play. So
Exactly. So I do think if they were able to find a way to reincorporate those events, or I mean, definitely if they could reincorporate them, even if it was just, annually they came back or something and were optional type of thing. Um,
yeah.
so people could play through them, but if they, couldn't find a way to do that, um, incorporating some of the limited time items at some period in the like not immediately after the event kind of thing, because then people aren't as encouraged to try and do event stuff, but knowing that down the road if you didn't finish something it's not the end of the world because in 6 months or something, or they
They
would add
honestly,
in.
they should make it in they should honestly make it like an anniversary thing. Like, hey, we'll pool in all of the limited event weapons or refinements, and once a year you'll be able to choose one of the weapons that you didn't have an opportunity to get, and all you have to do is just be around for when that happens. And if you're playing, like, you're going to make sure you're around for it, especially if the game's keeping you around. Um, and it's there as like a backup. It's, you know, it's not there of like a, oh well, I just won't do this event and I'll get the weapon in a year. Like, I don't think any, like, obviously you're everyone's going to want to partake in the current content of the game. So that's copium to the highest level. Like, I actually think Genshin for the most part is unfortunately stuck in its ways. Like, the things that we have in it are kind of the things that we're going to get in it until I'm proven otherwise. But it seems like the Genshin formula has been established. We're going into our third year of the game. So I feel like if they haven't done it yet, like, they changed resin once back during 1.1, 1.2, and then that was kind of the established, like, and ever since then it's been the norm. Same thing with the weapon banner. Like, they changed the weapon banner wish system in 2.0, and then that's been the norm. And I feel like I hate to sound cynical, but like, as much as I would want that to be the case, I just don't know why they don't see it as a benefit for people who've been playing since then and people who are newer. You know what I mean?
Well, I know. So someone had asked, how do they do it in a Honkai? And so ignoring the how they redo events, but actually it kind of made me think of, and also your comment about, having a once a year kind of selection type thing. Almost in Honkai there's like the time capsule where it's like if you do certain things in game
Yeah,
at
yeah.
a specific point, you get the currency, and so it's like you could get something limited, or you could get something, like maybe something like that where it's still encouraging you to play something, and then you can get, one thing from the shop, kind of like what you were saying. And then if they did that twice a year or something, or once a year, um, I feel like that's something they could incorporate,
Yeah.
which wouldn't it would kind of still be like, oh hey, well, if you do this and you already have all the stuff, you can use that resource towards, something else in the shop, maybe something that's not limited time, but something. um so I would definitely make sure I had like all the Sealy colors because they're so cute. But
Yeah.
and I like them to
Yeah,
match my
and
character.
they can even make it like like a they can even like tie it in lore wise, because like have an Irminsul shop, because Irminsul basically preserves the
Oh, that'd
memories
be
of the
fun.
world. So, or like a ley line shop, and like it's like, hey, you're going through a past memory of Tevat, which is essentially a past event that is no longer available, And yeah, like I feel like it would be so easy to implement. I just don't really understand, I don't really know how it would be implemented in a way that's beneficial for obviously it would be beneficial for newcomers, but you know, what is that basically obsolete for someone like me who has partaken in everything and has everything, you know? So it would only really benefit newer players, which then I could see it being like, well, that takes resources away from something that would benefit everybody. And I just don't.
Well, and that's why I was
I
thinking they
really.
would add something to the shop that maybe wouldn't necessarily be limited time, but would still be useful.
Yeah.
Um, maybe like a artifact reroll item. But something that would encourage people who already have everything, like you and also like me, but wouldn't punish people who started late and couldn't get the stuff, or were busy doing stuff in life that allowed them to not finish those events. And so kind of like finding the balance of, it's like, okay, well, if you'd rather have this item that's more geared towards people who already have all the limited stuff, then
Yeah.
that's
They would
your
have
choice, kind
to.
of thing.
Yeah, they'd have to create another material or currency, like a currency that you could then like just hold on to until this limited shop presents itself. Because I play Honkai as well. I'm not as like in depth with it as Genshin, just because I'm like years behind. But I do know that there are opportunities where I can invest in something that used to be like out at the time, and then it's not if I choose to. Um, so I'm just surprised that Genshin hasn't followed up on that, because I feel like the game's been out for 2.5 years. There's so much stuff in the game that is exclusive, that I'm surprised they didn't do it sooner, unless it's something that they do plan to do, but they plan to like drip feed it out over time.
Yeah, just because, I mean, even just from the lore perspective, like imagining not being able to do the Dragon Spine events, it's like those were in Unreconciled, all of them, all of
Yeah.
you,
I
wishful
mean, if you
drops,
don't do
like.
if you didn't do the two Dragon Spine events, you pretty much have no concept of who Albedo is as a character. Like even with his story quest leaves so much to be desired. Um, Outside of like his one mention of like destroying Mondstadt, it's really those follow-up events that fleshed out his character. And like realistically, if I didn't do those events, Albedo probably wouldn't be my second favorite character in the game. So and then like apply that to someone who is starting the game today, and it's just like how much content that they are just inherently stripped of because they weren't here sooner. That's just because like to me it's like, because I've seen and I've witnessed I'm a witness like the traveler, because I've seen everything and because I've witnessed everything. I have this like I have this fear that there are going to be some people that look at Genshin who are playing it just as much as I am, but they're playing it 1 year later or 2 years later, and they're going to have an inherently different view of the game because there's stuff that they didn't get to experience. And like it's hard to convince them otherwise, because it's like seeing is believing. It's like, well, from their perspective, the game is lesser than because there's all of these missing holes, and that's a fundamental flaw of the game and how it chooses to present that information. So
There's
you know,
also just so much information. Like, it's just,
yeah.
even if you're trying to backtrack, it's like, trying to re-experience, even if you're just watching old videos of it, it's just there's so
Yeah.
much. It's like sometimes I'll even go back, I'll be like, they said that? Really? Like
Yeah.
I do
Like
not remember that, but yeah, it's just there's so much information, so it's like, okay, like what do I focus on? And it would be hard, I feel like, to come in. Well, it wouldn't be hard to come into play just because, like, the story's so enjoyable, but like, being caught up on all like the
I
little
was
tiny
just
details that are
Yep.
dropped
I
in
was
the
just about to say that. I was just
Yeah,
about to
where it's
say that
like
because I'm mulling over in my head with my community about starting a free to play account. And to be honest, the number one thing that's holding me back is just like I would have to redo everything I've already done. And like even taking out all of the limited content, that's still a lot of content. And like I feel like Genshin is a great game if you don't care about being caught up. But like everyone that plays the game is going to want to be a part of the conversation with everybody else. No one's going to want to feel left out. And that's going to, that in turn drives people to binge and like drives them to rush through content. Like when the game first came out, everybody and their mother was just like playing this game nonstop, nonstop. And then like, then they're waiting for the next patch and then they're waiting for the next patch because they do everything immediately as it comes out. That I feel like the reverse would be just as daunting for someone to start the game and be like, all right, you got all 7 nations out. Have fun feeling like you're making progress because
yeah,
there's just a
I could
bajillion
not
things going
imagine
on.
I could not imagine doing the R&R quest again.
Oh my
Because
god, yeah.
I've also wanted to, just kind of to revisit some of the stuff that happened so long ago. Um, like, but at the same time it's like, oh my gosh, it's just like all the quests are which I love them. I love how,
Yeah.
how in depth they are and love the story, but trying to like, go through that. I mean, you could do it more casually, I guess, but still I know me and I am just like
Yeah.
I see a little quest marker and I'm like, I need to do it now. Like, so
Yeah.
I am
For me too, like I honestly think I've been able to manage Genshin so well because I'm typically done with all content before a new patch comes out. And because I'm not like constant like I'm still catching up. Like I'm reading weapons and reading artifacts and even with that stuff I'm kind of like finishing it up. And like I've gone through all of the Mondstadt, Liyue, and Inazuma weapon artifact lore. I'm gonna try to go through all of the Sumeru lore before the end of this patch, so that way going into the next patch I'll have a clean slate. And it's always nice like that's just a great feeling for me to have because I feel like because I've been up to date, it's so much easier for me to micromanage like the things on my plate. Like I'll hate them story quest, I have the desert lore, I have finishing up 100%ing the desert for exploration, I have weapon and artifact lore I'm gonna read. And like that's all very manageable to do in the next month for me. And like because I'm up to date and I have like 6 weeks to get through an X amount of content that doesn't seem to be all that overwhelming for me for how I pace myself. I feel like I've benefited because I've been up to date. But like I could not imagine like jumping into this game today and just being like I would be so overwhelmed, especially because like I like tackling things in sections. So like I didn't leave I I was AR 45 when I started the Liyue storyline. When I started the Liyue Archon quest, I was AR 45. And it was because I didn't leave Mondstadt until I 100%ed everything. And so like that's how I would basically play the game. So essentially if I started the game now, I would never be caught up. And so yeah, I completely understand like with YouTube because then on top of that, like I read everything, like I don't skip anything in the game, like no matter how significant or insignificant, and that's its that has its pros and cons as well. But
Yeah, I read everything. So it's kind of I could I it's kind of along the lines of what you said. Tried to go through it again. It would I feel like when I first started out, so I had found out about Genshin like I had friends who were playing and they were like, "Oh, come like, play this game with us that's about to come out." And I was like, "I don't know what that is. I haven't even heard of that. Like, what?" And then I started playing it, and so I was just, like, doing a lot of, like, running around, like, not really paying attention to as much stuff. And then, like, I got really super invested in the story, and I think there's only, like, one of them who still plays, and meanwhile, here I am on a Genshin Lore podcast, so, you know, but, it's just I was kind of in the beginning doing everything out of order and just kind of, exploring and unlocking the map and la di da di da, swimming around, being a fishy. But but yeah, so it would be nice to kind of go back and, do Mondstadt in its entirety, like by itself without, overlapping anything. Um, but at the same time, there's just so much that,
Yeah, I already told my
trying to go back through it would.
yeah, I already told my community if I do if I do a free to play account, I'm skipping all the dialogue. Like I know everything. Like I could probably recite these quotes myself at this point based on how much I've rewatched certain things and edited back my own content for my YouTube channel. But yeah, I definitely have a special place in my heart for the newer players. And every time I said it with Guizhong, I was like, bro, this is limited content. This is so sad
I
because
know it's just so I
it's
can't
so
believe it.
pivotal.
Yeah, because even if you can rewatch the video, the little cutscene video, or not cutscene, but the artistic looking one,
Yeah.
like the rest of the quest isn't there. You don't get you don't get to experience
Yeah, it's like, are you
the
playing a game or are you watching a game, you know?
yeah, you don't get to experience the um when the one attuned to my soul is no longer here. Who else could hope to understand this tune? It's like, what? Like, Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just I would be very interested in replaying from the beginning if they had something where it's like they would insert the old events kind of in the timeline. Like if you were a new
Yeah.
player or a player who hadn't completed them, like that would be like I would immediately start another account to get to play those again and be like, okay, yeah, I can do I could do that. So
Yeah.
um that would definitely be fun. Alrighty, well, um, thank you, Arnold, for joining us today. But we are
This was
getting
a great conversation.
yeah, this
I'm
was
pretty
so
sure
much fun.
a little over time, but I don't usually get to do this. Like this is my favorite part of Genshin is just talking about the lore with people, and it's really great to just meet more and more people in the community who like I feel like when I talk to you about the lore, you understand what I'm saying. And for like unfortunately not everyone in the community is on that same wavelength, so I really enjoyed the conversations we had today.
Yeah, this was so much fun, and I'm so happy you joined us today because I just absolutely love talking lore and like the crazy theories, the not crazy theories. I really like love it all. It's really fun to kind of look at things from the all the different perspectives. So
Yeah.
really, really enjoyed having you on here. But is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers before we call it off?
Yeah, just thank you guys for tuning in, for supporting the collaboration that we have here. Sorry for the little scuffed experience at the start. My internet was all over the place, but we seem to keep it put together for now. So thank you to my community, to your community, to people who might be watching this on the VODs or on YouTube. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. One final question for you, Tuna, before we go. Are you planning on checking out Honkai Star Rail?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
just curious.
yeah, I really like turn-based
Oh
combat
yeah,
and
me too. I Persona 5 Royal is my favorite video game of all time, and so
love
that's
Persona
right up
5.
my alley.
Yeah, and I had the benefit of getting to do the beta. So I won't say anything more than that, but I
Ooh, oh lucky.
absolutely loved it. So I was actually really sad when it ended. I was like, when are you coming out? So, but all
Yeah.
right. Okay, that's the all the time we have for today. So thank you all for listening in and we'll see you next time for one more cup of coffee.
Bye bye.